Landon and I were the ultimate toxic couple of the survival base. He hated me because I personally sent my sickly sister to the research lab. He thought I only did it to harvest the antiviral serum from her veins. I hated him because his eyes only ever saw her. Even in this brutal apocalypse, he protected a woman who couldn't even lift a lead pipe. For 10 years in the wasteland, we spat the same curse at each other every single day. I hope you die a miserable death. But when the zombie horde finally breached our last line of defense, things changed. He used heavy chains to lock me inside an armored rig, and stood alone against the tide of monsters. Live, I watched him get swallowed by the sea of undead. The sound of snapping bones and tearing flesh echoed through the air. As he lay dying, he pulled out a faded photo of my sister. He tucked it against the only clean spot on his chest. "I'm giving you this life," he whispered. "If there's a next life, don't touch her again." That night, I went back and blew up the entire base. When I opened my eyes again, I found the zombie king. His razor-sharp bone claws gripped my throat, but I just smiled and held his cold hand. "Let's make a deal," I said. "If you give the human bases 5 years of peace, I will willingly become your queen." In my last life, he died to save me. In this life, I'll become the monster to give them exactly what they wanted. Anyone who touches Nora has to go through me first. Landon's voice cut through the air like a sharp blade. I snapped my head up and saw him standing shield-like in front of my sister. His eyes were murderous as he glared at me. My heart gave a violent squeeze. He was supposed to be dead. He had died in the zombie horde just to keep me breathing. "Landon, it's okay. If sacrificing me can save everyone, I'm willing to do it." Nora sobbed quietly, her frail body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Landon's eyes softened with agonizing pity. He clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. "No. I won't stand by and watch you get hurt." The situation was at a total standstill. The head of the research lab walked over to me. "Commander Zoe, Miss Nora was bitten, but for some reason she didn't turn. If we can develop a vaccine from her, it would be the greatest contribution to humanity." The man's eyes gleamed with a fanatical, crazed light. "In my past life, Nora died in that lab, and the vaccine was never found." I bit my lip and looked at the couple standing a few feet away. Landon gave Nora a look of pure devotion. "Don't worry, Nora. I'll keep you safe. If they want you, they'll have to step over my corpse." Since we were kids, it was always the three of us, Landon, Nora, and me. But from the very beginning, he only ever had eyes for her. In my last life, I believed the lab's lies and handed her over myself. She died a horrific death, and Landon ended up dying for me anyway. Landon looked at me now, his face twisted with pure disgust. "Nora is your own flesh and blood. Do you even realize what you're doing? How can a woman be as wicked as you? Are you really this cold-blooded?" He was usually such a calm man, yet he spat such venomous words at me. "Fine. Let her go," I heard myself say. "I'm telling you, if you dare lay a finger on Nora." Landon stopped mid-sentence as my words finally registered. "What did you say?" "I said I'm letting her go. I agree to your terms." Landon froze, looking like he couldn't believe his ears. "Zoe Quinn, what kind of sick game are you playing now?" He stared at me, his suspicion deep-rooted. I looked at him and suddenly felt an overwhelming wave of exhaustion. "Get lost. Before I change my mind." I turned my back on them, my voice sounding raw and hollow. When he led Nora away, he didn't look back even once. I stood there alone, my nails digging deep into the palms of my hands. The lab director walked up to me, looking absolutely devastated. "Commander, do you have any idea what you've done? Without that serum, the human race is doomed." I took a deep breath and swept a freezing gaze over him. "Were you even sure it would work? Or did you just suggest this because your daughter likes Landon and he rejected her?" I hit the nail right on the head. The director pointed a finger at me, speechless for a long time. Finally, he let out a cold sneer. "You have a sharp tongue. I can't wait to see how you explain this to the rest of the survivors." "Don't you worry about that. I have my own way." With that, I turned and walked away. I returned to my freezing apartment, my stomach burning with a sharp hunger. The words of the supply manager were still ringing in my ears. "Commander Landon took your rations. He traded them for high-grade flour for Miss Nora." My fingertips went numb instantly. Landon didn't even care if I starved. He could take my life-saving food just to please her. What did I even mean to him? I was so hungry my vision started to blur. I curled up on the floor, unable to move. In my daze, I felt like I was back in my previous life. Every year on the anniversary of Nora's death, he would trade my food for her favorite flowers. I would faint from hunger, and the next day, I'd retaliate by destroying his supplies. Then, when he was on the brink of death, I'd throw him a scrap of food just to keep the cycle going. 5 years of mutual torture. 5 years of wishing the other was dead. My breathing grew shallow, and the room began to fade into darkness. "Zoe Quinn." A cold, deep voice suddenly cut through the silence. I forced my eyelids open with great effort. Standing in the shadows was Silas Jackson, the Zombie King. He was there, silent as a ghost. His pale, gray eyes held no emotion. Since you promised to marry me, I will honor the 5-year truce. A million questions bubbled up, but my body was too weak. I didn't even have the strength to speak. Silas seemed to notice my condition. The next second, a heavy tin of canned beef was placed by my hand. With a flicker of a shadow, he vanished. The instinct to survive took over everything else. I grabbed the can and began to eat like a starving animal. Once the food hit my stomach, my strength slowly started to return. I had just pushed myself up against the wall when it happened. Bang! The door was kicked open with violent force. Landon stormed in like an avenging demon, his eyes bloodshot and wild. Zoe Quinn, I should have known you were a snake. He lunged at me. He grabbed my throat and slammed me against the wall with terrifying strength. Suffocation washed over me. My heart felt like it was being pierced by 1,000 needles. There it was again, that look. The same look of pure hatred he gave me 1,000 times in the past. Let go. I wheezed, clawing at his thick forearms. He snarled and threw me aside. As I hit the floor, I saw his hand twitch, as if he instinctively wanted to reach out. But he quickly balled it into a fist, his eyes filling with even more poisonous rage. Before I could catch my breath, he grabbed my arm like I was a piece of trash and dragged me toward the door. In the middle of the base square, Nora was surrounded by a furious crowd. What's wrong with sacrificing one person? It's for the sake of humanity. You should be honored. You useless brat. If it wasn't for Zoe and Landon, you'd be zombie food. Now you won't even help? You're ungrateful. Yeah, she's a total leech. Trash and stones began to rain down on Nora. She curled into a ball, her body shaking violently. She whimpered like a frightened rabbit. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Landon's eyes turned a terrifying shade of red. He looked like his heart was breaking. He sprinted forward and pulled her into his arms, shielding her. All of you, shut the hell up. He snapped his head toward me, his gaze as cold as ice. Zoe Quinn, you said this had nothing to do with you? Prove it. Landon's lips curled into a cruel smirk. His voice boomed across the square. Do you all want to know why the zombie horde attacked us? He pointed a finger directly at me. It was our great commander Zoe. She ignored orders and went alone to provoke the zombie king. She enraged him, and that's why we're in this mess. The crowd gasped. Everyone turned to look at me with disbelief. Zoe, we trusted you. That's why we called you commander. Did you really risk all our lives just to show off? A wave of insults and curses crashed over me. I stood there frozen. It felt like the blood in my veins had turned to slush. Across the square, Landon was tenderly wiping Nora's tears away, holding her close and whispering comforts. The sight was like a hot poker to my eyes. He knew. He knew exactly why I had gone to the zombie king's lair. I did it to save him. He was the one who went into the red zone alone, just to find a designer bag Nora said she liked. He got captured by the king. Everyone said he was a goner. But I refused to give up. I told myself that even if he was just a corpse, I was bringing him home. And now, just to save his precious Nora from some public embarrassment, he was flipping the script. He was pinning the blame on me, knowing full well what the consequences would be. For Nora, he would do anything. He would ruin me without blinking. Landon picked Nora up in his arms. As he walked past me, his eyes never strayed from her face. He didn't give me a single glance. Not even a second of his time. I watched his back as he walked away. He was so decisive, so cold. He didn't hesitate for a moment. My heart grew colder than the winter air. I clenched my fists so hard my nails drew blood from my palms. But I couldn't feel the pain. I stood tall in the center of the square. I let the angry crowd push me and scream at me. I became their punching bag. I tried to calm them down, telling them I would take responsibility for our safety. But it was no use. The malice surrounded me. They took all the frustration of living in this hellhole and dumped it on my head. I wiped a smear of blood from my lip. My voice was raspy but clear. It's my fault. Don't worry, I'll make it right. The respect I had built over years vanished in a single afternoon. The crowd slowly dispersed, leaving behind only bitterness. When I got back to my apartment, I saw a familiar Lucky knot lying on the floor. Landon made these himself. It was a unique craft. Was this a late apology? Or was it a payment for saving his sister? I picked up the intricate knot. My fingers were ice cold. I let out a soft, mocking laugh. What a joke. Then, I tossed it into the trash can without a second thought. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find the last person I expected. Looking at Nora, my feelings were a mess of knots. I didn't know how to act around her anymore. Nora grabbed my hand. Zoe, you're still the same as when we were kids. You're so stubborn it's heartbreaking. I kept my lips pressed tight and said nothing. She hung around for a bit before turning to leave. Right as she reached the door, she gave me a strange, knowing smile. I heard the zombie king sent you a marriage proposal. Are you going to say yes, sister? My heart stopped. How did she know? I hadn't told a soul about that letter. 2 hours later, My door was kicked off its hinges with explosive force. Landon charged in like a rabid beast. He grabbed me and threw me to the ground. "Where is Nora?" he roared, his eyes bloodshot as he choked me. "I'm not her keeper." "How should I know?" My throat was being crushed. I could barely breathe. "You don't know? You're the last person who saw her. She's kind and doesn't have an enemy in the world. Who else would hurt her besides a jealous bitch like you?" He didn't believe a word I said. Smack. He backhanded me so hard my ears started ringing. My cheek swelled instantly. Still playing dumb? Landon had completely lost his mind. He grabbed me by the hair and slammed my forehead against the concrete floor. Agony exploded behind my eyes. Warm blood immediately flooded my vision, turning the world into a red blur. "I'm asking you one last time. Where is she?" He hauled me up like a dead dog. "I don't know." My consciousness was slipping away. "Fine. Have it your way." He started dragging me outside. "Landon." A voice called out from the distance. Nora ran up and threw her arms around Landon, her voice trembling with tears. "Landon, I was so scared. A group of people just tried to take me to the Zombie King. They said it was Zoe's idea." Time seemed to freeze. Landon let out a jagged, cold laugh. The energy around him turned violent. A massive surge of power slammed into my unprotected shoulder. I coughed up a spray of blood. It felt like every organ in my body had been shattered. He dropped me like a piece of garbage and pulled Nora behind him. "If you love the idea of marrying a zombie so much, you can go yourself." With that, he walked away with her. I lay on the ground, my eyes heavy. Just as I was about to pass out, I heard a voice. I didn't expect my bride to be in such a pathetic state. I looked up. My pupils shrank as I saw Silas standing there, arms crossed. How did he get in? How did no one notice him? Silas walked over and tilted my chin up. His fingers were cold as ice, forcing me to look into his bottomless, dead eyes. "Come with me." His voice was low and steady like a freezing current under a lake. My heart jumped into my throat. At my best, Landon and I together could barely hold Silas to a draw. Now, I was alone and half dead. I was nothing more than an ant to him. But the will to live is a powerful thing. I let go of my clenched fist and grabbed the hem of his pants with trembling fingers. "Fine," I rasped, my voice shaking with desperation. "Let's go. Now." The wind outside the broken door was deafening, carrying the scent of dry dust, ozone and copper. Silas did not carry me like a fragile maiden. He hooked an arm under my ribs, hoisting my shattered body against his hard, armor-plated chest with effortless efficiency. His skin felt like polished marble carved from an iceberg, devoid of a pulse, yet radiating a terrible, silent power. "Hold on," he said. Before I could draw breath, the world blurred into streaks of gray and black. He didn't run like a human. He moved with instantaneous, terrifying velocity, leaping across the 40-foot perimeter wall of base Alpha without triggering a single pressure sensor or thermal alarm. The searchlights swept uselessly. Beneath us, illuminating empty concertina wire and frozen mud. Behind us, the harsh sirens of the human fortress wailed into the midnight air, growing fainter and fainter, until they were swallowed by the endless howling of the wasteland. The agony in my shattered shoulder flared with every jolt of our landing, white-hot needles stabbing into my lungs. My vision swam with dark spots. Blood pooled beneath my tongue, warm and metallic. "Don't die yet, Commander Quinn," Silas murmured, his low baritone vibrating against my cheek. "A corpse makes a rather dull bride." "Shut up." I wheezed through cracked, bloody lips. "Just don't drop me." A faint sound came from his throat, something resembling a dark, dry chuckle. We crossed the scorched dead zone, entering the ruins of the old capital within an hour. This was the forbidden zone, where no human recon team had ever returned alive. Towering skyscrapers, draped in bioluminescent black moss and frozen vines, loomed like ancient stone giants against the bruised purple sky. At the heart of the city stood the Grand Archive, a colossal, brutalist fortress of reinforced concrete and obsidian glass. As Silas stepped through the grand archway, the shadows in the hall rippled. Dozens of high-tier mutants, creatures with chitinous carapaces, glowing amber eyes and razor appendages that could slice an armored tank in half, knelt in unison on the cracked marble floor. Not a single hiss or growl disturbed the silence. Their discipline was absolute. They were not mindless beasts. They were an army. Silas bypassed them without a glance, carrying me up a spiral staircase into a vast, sunlit conservatory at the top of the tower. In the center of the room sat a massive basin filled with a luminescent, silver-blue liquid that smelled faintly of pine and ozone. "What is that?" I asked, my voice fading as shock settled into my veins. "The primal matrix," Silas said, stepping into the shallow edge of the basin and laying me gently into the warm, tingling pool. "Your organs are shredded, Zoe. Quinn. Your bones are crushed. Human medicine would leave you a cripple in a wheelchair, begging for scraps from the man who broke you." The liquid seeped into my torn skin, and a blinding wave of agony washed over me. I arched my back, screaming as thousands of microscopic tendrils seemed to bore into my marrow, knitting bone, repairing torn muscle, and burning out the weakness of my mortal flesh. Silas stood over me, his pale gray eyes fixed on mine with unwavering intensity. He sliced the tip of his claw across his own palm, letting thick, dark silver blood drip directly onto my parted lips. Drink, he commanded softly. Rebirth is not a gift. It is a conquest. I didn't hesitate. I drank. For 3 days and 3 nights, my body burned in the crucible of evolution. I relived every second of my 10 years in the wasteland. I saw Landon taking my emergency rations, smiling as he gave white flour to Nora. I saw him pinning me against the concrete, calling me a venomous snake, while his knuckles drew blood from my face. I saw him in our past life locking me in that armored truck, holding Nora's picture against his bleeding heart, telling me not to touch her in the next life. If there's a next life, don't touch her again. A bitter, freezing laugh echoed in the depths of my subconscious. Don't worry, Landon. In this life, I won't touch her. I will make you both watch as the world you built on my back crumbles into dust. When I finally opened my eyes, the agony was gone. The air felt crystal clear. I could hear the microscopic shifting of frost crystals on the glass dome 300 feet above. I could smell the damp earth of the forest 20 miles to the south. I sat up, the silver liquid cascading off my skin like liquid silk. My shattered shoulder was completely healed, stronger, denser, radiating an invisible aura of kinetic power. My skin was smooth and fair, but beneath my fingernails, a faint, metallic sheen of black alloy lay dormant, ready to extend into razor claws at a single thought. My eyes, once dull brown from exhaustion, now burned with a vibrant, predatory crimson. I wasn't a decaying zombie. I was something entirely new, the apex synthesis of human will and mutant evolution. A tailored suit of obsidian combat leather and a flowing crimson cape hung on a stand beside the basin. I stepped out, dressed with deliberate care, and buckled a pair of high-frequency alloy daggers to my thighs. Silas was waiting on the terrace, leaning against the balustrade, watching the sun rise over the dead city. You took to the virus faster than I anticipated, he said without turning around. Most humans lose their minds to the hunger within the first hour. My hunger isn't for flesh, Silas, I said, walking up beside him. The morning wind whipped my black hair around my face. It's for order. He looked at me, a gleam of genuine respect flashing in his pale eyes. The 5-year truce with base Alpha began yesterday, Silas said. My swarms have pulled back 50 miles from their outer agricultural perimeter. They believe they are safe. They believe Landon's strength and Nora's purity saved them. I replied, my voice dropping into a lethal, quiet calm. They have no idea that every grain of wheat they harvest over the next 5 years is paid for by the woman they stoned in the square. And what will you do when the 5 years are up? Silas asked, tilting his head. I won't need 5 years, I said, looking toward the horizon where base Alpha lay. Landon and Nora don't know how to survive without a victim to bleed dry. Give them 6 months, and they will tear each other apart. Back in base Alpha, the euphoria of the miracle had begun to wear off. In the first week following Zoe Quinn's disappearance, the base had thrown a grand festival. Commander Landon was hailed as the supreme hero who had driven off the zombie king and protected his pure, compassionate sister. Nora was celebrated as the saint of the dawn, paraded through the streets in clean white dresses while survivors showered her with dried flowers. Landon stood at the podium during the victory banquet, receiving the High Council's Gold Medal of Valor. Yet as the crowd cheered, his eyes kept wandering toward the empty seat at the far end of the commander's table. For 10 years, Zoe had always occupied that seat. She was always the one who stayed up until dawn reviewing the ammunition logistics. She was the one who checked the defensive turrets in the freezing mud, while everyone else drank warm cider. She was the one who patched his combat armor after every patrol, never saying a word, leaving clean bandages and hot broth on his desk before he woke up. Landon, what's wrong? Nora's soft, sweet voice pulled him from his thoughts. She leaned against his shoulder, clutching his arm with frail, delicate fingers. You haven't eaten your braised beef. Are you still thinking about her? Landon frowned, shaking the strange coldness from his chest. No. She betrayed the base. She conspired with the undead. She got what she deserved. I'm just so glad you're safe, Nora whispered, burying her face in his chest. Without you, I don't know how I'd survive. Landon smiled, stroking her hair, but an inexplicable knot of unease tightened in his gut. The cracks began to show on the 20th day. Commander Landon, the chief supply officer, burst into the command bunker, looking pale and frantic. The Western water purification system has suffered a catastrophic biofilter clog. The backup pumps are failing. Landon set his mug down, his brow furrowing. Then switched to the secondary. Filtration protocols. Why are you bringing this to me? The officer looked at him in sheer bewilderment. Sir, Commander Zoe was the only one with the mechanical clearance codes and the technical blueprint for the reverse osmosis array. She maintained those filters by hand every Tuesday. Landon's jaw tightened. Call the engineering unit. Let them crack the terminal. We tried, sir. The core operating system has an anti-tamper lock. Commander Zoe built the entire rig from salvaged scrap. Without her manual overrides forcing, the valves will rupture the main pressure tanks. A cold sweat broke out across Landon's collar. What about the ration reserves? We're down 40%, the officer stammered, dropping his gaze. Miss Nora requested the high-grade wheat and canned fruits be distributed to the civilian nursery and her personal entourage last week. We don't have enough winter reserves to last through November. Nora was just trying to show compassion. Landon snapped defensively, though. His voice sounded thin even to his own ears. I'll lead a scavenging team into the Eastern Sector tomorrow. Sir, the Eastern Sector is a Class 4 mutant zone. I am the top fighter in this base. Landon roared, slamming his fist onto the metal map table. Prepare the armored vehicles. The Eastern scavenging run was an unmitigated disaster. Without Zoe's tactical maps and her uncanny ability to predict mutant patrol routes, Landon's 12-vehicle convoy drove straight into a subterranean nest of acid-spitting burrowers. Within 10 minutes, 4 armored personnel carriers were dissolved into smoking heaps of melted steel. 16 elite soldiers were torn to pieces. Landon fought like a possessed demon, his plasma blade flashing in the dark, but the chaos was uncontrollable. When a massive burrower queen lunged at his flank, he instinctively barked out a command. Zoe, flank left with the suppression ice. Silence answered him. Only the wet, sickening crunch of his lieutenant's ribs snapping in the beast's jaws snapped him back to reality. Zoe wasn't there. There was no frost barrier to freeze the queen's legs. There were no high-frequency daggers pinning the monster's blind spots. There was only mud, screaming men, and the terrifying realization that he had never fought a major battle alone in his entire life. Landon barely escaped with his life, dragged back to base Alpha with third-degree acid burns across his chest and arms. When he staggered into the infirmary, gasping for air through blistered lungs, he expected Nora to be there with sterile bandages and painkillers. Instead, the infirmary was empty. Where is Miss Nora? Landon wheezed, grabbing the young nurse by the collar. The nurse shrank back, her eyes filled with resentment. Miss Nora, she said. The smell of antiseptic made her nauseous. She's hosting a prayer tea in the upper VIP pavilion for the council members' wives. Landon's grip went slack. He fell back onto the blood-soaked gurney, staring at the peeling paint of the ceiling. For the first time in his life, the image of Zoe flashed in his mind with agonizing, pristine clarity. 3 years ago, when he had caught a venomous barb during the winter siege, Zoe had spent 72 hours kneeling beside his bed, sucking the black poison from his infected wounds with her own mouth until her lips were swollen and bleeding. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't slept. She had held his shivering hands through the fever, whispering, "Don't you dare die on me, Landon. If you die, who's going to protect this useless world?" A sudden, sharp pain pierced his chest, not from the acid burns, but from a terrifying, bottomless hollow that opened inside his soul. Zoe, he whispered into the empty room. 3 months into the truce, the human base received an official diplomatic envoy from the undead citadel. A single rider, cloaked in black titanium armor and mounted on a massive, 2-headed shadow wolf, approached the outer gate of base Alpha. The rider threw a sealed obsidian scroll at the feet of the guard tower. The sovereign of the dead summons the commanders of the human alliance to the borderline citadel for the triennial peace ratification. The rider's voice boomed like rolling thunder. If base Alpha fails to send its chief commander within 48 hours, the truce is void. Panic swept through the High Council. We have no choice, the council elder said, wiping sweat from his bald head. Landon, you must go. Take our best peace offerings. Take the high-grade energy crystals. Nora, dressed in an elaborate lace shawl, clung to Landon's arm, trembling. Landon, don't go. What if they kill you? What if they eat you alive? Landon looked down at her. Over the past 3 months, Nora had grown increasingly demanding. She complained about the rations, complained about the cold, and threw tantrums whenever he was too injured to escort her to social gatherings. The delicate, pure flower he had sworn to protect now felt like a heavy, suffocating parasite wrapped around his neck. I have to go, Nora, Landon said, pulling his arm from her grasp with an edge of coldness he had never used with her before. If I don't go, the Horde will level this base in 24 hours. Then take me with you. Nora sobbed theatrically, dropping to her knees. If you die, I want to die with you. The council members nodded with sentimental approval, praising her devotion. Landon sighed, feeling a dull headache throbbing behind his eyes. Fine. Pack your things. The journey to the borderline citadel took a full day. The citadel was an ancient Gothic fortress carved directly into the sheer granite face of the northern mountains. Thousands of elite mutant soldiers, clad in immaculate obsidian armor, holding high-frequency energy halberds, lined the winding stone road in terrifying, silent formation. When Landon and Nora stepped into the grand throne room, the air was thick with the scent of burning amber and crushed frost. High on the dais, seated on twin thrones carved from black meteoritic iron, sat two figures. On the right sat Silas Jackson, the zombie king, radiating a cold, suffocating pressure that made the human guards fall to their knees in instinctive terror. And on the left, Landon's breath hitched. His heart stopped dead in his chest. Seated on the sovereign queen's throne was a woman clad in an exquisite gown of black silk and liquid crimson steel. A crown of jagged dark diamonds rested upon her raven-black hair. Her porcelain skin was flawless, her crimson eyes glowing with supreme godlike authority. A delicate black alloy claw rested casually on the armrest of her throne, tapping with a slow rhythmic clack, clack, clack. Zoe, Landon choked out, his voice cracking like dry wood. The name echoed through the cavernous throne room. The human delegates gasped, scrambling backward in sheer disbelief. Zoe Quinn. Nora shrieked, her voice losing every trace of its sweet innocence, turning into a harsh, ugly squawk. You're alive? You really became the monster's whore. Before the words had fully left Nora's mouth, the temperature in the room plummeted 50 degrees. Crack. A shockwave of frost exploded from the dais. In a fraction of a second, an invisible kinetic hand grabbed Nora by the throat, hoisting her 20 feet into the air and slamming her violently against the granite pillar. Nora, Landon roared, drawing his plasma blade and lunging toward the dais. Clang. Silas didn't even move from his throne. With a casual flick of his wrist, a wall of black ice erupted from the floor, shattering Landon's plasma blade into molten shards and sending him crashing onto his back, coughing up blood. Know your place, mortal, Silas said, his voice dropping to a sub-zero vibration that rattled the marrow in their bones. You are speaking to the sovereign queen of the undead empire. Another disrespectful breath, and I will hang your entrails from the battlements. Zoe slowly stood up from her throne. Every step she took down the marble stairs was accompanied by the faint, chiming sound of frost forming beneath her black boots. She walked up to the groveling, gasping Landon, looking down at him with eyes as vast, cold, and empty as the Arctic Sea. Landon, she murmured, her voice smooth and melodic, yet carrying the weight of a mountain. You look terrible. Has the human base run out of white flour? Landon stared up at her, trembling. The woman before him was familiar, yet completely, terrifyingly beyond his reach. The exhaustion, the self-doubt, the desperate yearning for a scrap of his affection, all of it had been burned away, replaced by an aura of absolute dominion. Zoe, Landon gasped, clutching his bleeding chest. You can't do this. You're human. You're a defender of humanity. How could you join them? Humanity. Zoe let out a soft, musical laugh that made Landon's blood run cold. She turned her gaze toward Nora, who was pinned against the pillar, her face turning purple as she choked for air. Is that humanity, Landon? Zoe asked softly. A creature that takes everything, gives nothing, frames her sister for treason, and lets 16 soldiers die so she can drink tea in a heated pavilion? What are you talking about? Landon shouted, his mind reeling. Nora didn't frame you. She was attacked by the mob because of your recklessness. Zoe smiled. She snapped her fingers. A massive holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the throne room, displaying high-definition surveillance footage from Base Alpha's internal archive. On the screen, Nora was seen walking into the supply depot 3 months ago, handing a pouch of stolen morphine to the supply officer. Tell everyone Commander Zoe provoked the horde. Nora's voice played through the crystalline speakers with horrific clarity. Tell them she stole the food. If Landon asks, tell him I cried all night because of her. The footage shifted to the private lab. The head of research was seen presenting a document to Nora. Miss Nora, your blood test shows no antiviral antibodies. You simply carry an inert dormant strain. If we harvest your serum, you won't save anyone, you'll just trigger an uncontrollable biomutation in the recipients. Then destroy the report. Nora's voice snarled on screen, her face twisted with vicious malice. Tell Landon my blood can save the world. As long as he thinks I'm the key to humanity's future, he will kill anyone who tries to hurt me, including my bitch of a sister. The entire human delegation stood frozen in petrified silence. Landon's eyes widened to the size of saucers. His jaw dropped, his chest heaving, as if he had been struck by a physical battering ram. Every memory, every lie, Every justification he had built over the last 10 years shattered into a million jagged pieces, tearing through his sanity like shrapnel. No. Landon whispered, his voice trembling violently. No. No, you said you told me. Zoe lowered her hand, and the kinetic force released Nora. Nora crashed onto the marble floor, coughing and retching, her white dress soaked in filth. Seeing her web of lies completely exposed, Nora abandoned all pretense of innocence. She looked up at Landon, her eyes wild with hysterical hatred. So what? Nora shrieked, spitting blood onto the stone. You stupid, arrogant brute. You think I ever loved you? You were just a blunt weapon. A guard dog I kept on a leash to fetch me supplies and kill anyone who threatened my comfort. You threw away the only woman who ever gave a damn about you, and you did it for a lie. You're an idiot, Landon. A blind, pathetic idiot. Shut up. Landon roared, lunging toward Nora with his bare hands, his face contorted in a mix of manic fury and soul-crushing despair. Crack. A spear of black ice pinned Landon's sleeve to the floor, halting him an inch from Nora's neck. Zoe stood between them, looking down at both of them with complete, unadulterated apathy. Don't kill her here, Landon, Zoe said coldly. You two belong together. A blind guard dog and a venomous leech. It would be a pity to separate such a perfect couple. Zoe, please. Landon fell forward, pressing his forehead against the freezing stone at her feet, sobbing so hard his shoulders convulsed violently. I was blind. I was a monster. Kill me. Rip my heart out. Just don't look at me like I'm a stranger. He wailed, reaching out with shaking, bloody fingers to touch the hem of her crimson cape. 10 years, Zoe. We survived the apocalypse. Together. I locked you in that truck because I wanted you to live. I died for you. Zoe looked down at him, her crimson eyes unblinking. You didn't die for me, Landon, she said, her voice dropping into a razor-sharp whisper. You died for the illusion of your own martyrdom. You died holding her picture. You told me never to touch her in the next life. She pulled her cape from his trembling fingers. I granted your wish. I left your world. I gave your base 5 years of peace. She turned her back on him, walking slowly up the stairs toward the obsidian throne where Silas sat waiting. Take your delegation and get out of my sight, Zoe commanded without looking back. When the 5 years end, we will see if base Alpha can survive without its commander's blood. Zoe, no, don't leave me. Landon screamed, clawing at the stone floor as the high-tier mutant guards dragged him and Nora toward the heavy iron gates. His agonized howls echoed through the long corridors of the citadel, fading into the cold, uncaring darkness of the wasteland. 2 years passed. Without Zoe's strategic intellect, and with Landon's spirit completely broken, base Alpha deteriorated at a terrifying speed. Landon had become a ghost. He refused to command, refused to fight, spending his days drinking industrial ethanol in the ruins of Zoe's old apartment, clutching the frayed lucky knot he had retrieved from the garbage dump. Nora had been stripped of all privileges by the furious survivors and forced to work in the coal processing pits, her soft skin blackened with soot, her beauty ruined by hard labor and disease. When the rogue warlords from the southern Badlands finally launched a full-scale siege on base Alpha, the outer walls collapsed within 3 hours. Landon didn't run. He walked out onto the burning battlefield with no weapons, no armor, wearing only the faded combat jacket Zoe had patched for him years ago. As the enemy's heavy artillery rained down around him, tearing the earth to shreds, Landon looked toward the northern sky where the dark clouds of the undead empire rolled like a majestic velvet sea. He pulled a small, blood-stained locket from his chest. Inside was not a picture of Nora, but a small drawing of a girl with sharp, determined eyes holding a lead pipe in the ruins of an old high school. I'm sorry, Zoe, he whispered, as the blinding light of an explosion swallowed him whole. I was always too blind to see the sun. High atop the grand archive in the undead citadel, Zoe stood on the open terrace, feeling the northern wind lift her hair. Beside her, Silas poured 2 glasses of dark, fermented crimson wine. Base Alpha has fallen, Silas said calmly, handing her a glass. The southern warlords have occupied the ruins. Zoe took the glass, swirling the dark liquid in the moonlight. She felt no sorrow. She felt no triumph. She felt only the vast, clean stillness of a warrior who had finally settled all her debts with the past. Mobilize the vanguard, Zoe said, raising her glass to the star-filled sky. It's time to teach the southern warlords what true order looks like. Silas smiled, a rare, genuine smile that held the lethal grace of a hunting wolf. As you command, my queen. Behind them, 10,000 elite legions roared into the night, their weapons gleaming under the silver moon, ready to march across the wasteland to build a new world upon the ashes of the old.